Welcome back to Wellness Wave. Thanks for tuning in this morning to ride the wave with us. Each week, our goal is to give you at least one suggestion that will make your life a little better. My name is Phil George. I'm a clinical biochemist, a certified personal trainer, and a health coach. Please remember that everything we discuss on the show is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. We were supposed to have a guest on today, but the guest had to cancel last minute, so this is going to be a solo show. And I like the solo shows because I get to cover a lot of stuff that sometimes I can't cover with a guest on. And what's interesting, I also have a radio show on WCRN. You can email me, philgeorge@charter.net. I'll send you over some links to that. We have some really, really good guests on that show. Top of the line experts in their field, and I really love that. But I also like doing the individuals because I can cover things that I can't cover because I have to respect the guest's time. Also like because on the radio show we can also take calls. I love calls because you answer questions. If they have a question, then most people have the same question. But what I find interesting, a lot of times I'll set the show up. I'll have a plan. I'll have different topics I want to cover. But sometimes the morning of the show, I'll run across something that I think is really important, and all my plans get scrapped because I go down that particular rabbit hole. Or sometimes I'll get somebody call in, and we'll go down a whole separate rabbit hole. So I get so many different things I meant to cover that I never wind up covering. So this gives me a chance to cover one. And interestingly enough, I had very specific topics I wanted to cover today, but actually, about an hour before I came on the show, I ran across a really brand new, interesting study that I think could help some people or people maybe get you a little bit healthier. So obviously, the big thing now in the news is the whole COVID thing, the COVID vaccines, and the rest of the stuff they're talking about, the possibility of causing damage. Whether you believe that or not, I'll leave that up to you. But there's a condition called long COVID. Most people have heard of that. Now, some people think the long COVID is due, to the COVID vaccine, and some people think it's just due to the virus. So again, I'll leave that up to you to make that decision. But what I found is they've done a lot of study on long COVID and COVID in general. And one of the things they found is, you probably heard, one of the big problems with COVID is trouble breathing. And they had to put you on ventilators and things like that because you can't breathe anymore. So as a biochemist, I want to understand the mechanism of action. So what exactly is this virus doing, this spike protein doing to you that's causing you not to be able to breathe? So as a clinical biochemist, my job description was I was be able to consult with physicians in terms of looking at pathologies or illnesses and coming up with a diagnosis. They're examining the patient, and I'm giving them the lab work, and I say, well, based on my findings in the lab work, this, and this. So there's an interesting phenomena, and this is the reason they found out why people have trouble breathing. So again, when I was doing lab work, this is before the time, I'm so old, this is before the time of computers. So everything I did was by hand. And actually, I really liked that I did that because it made me basically understand, the different illnesses, pathologies from the ground up. Because I would have to literally count what's called the CBC, complete blood count. Almost everybody gets that done. Your white count, your red count, hemoglobin, hematocrit, that stuff. And what happens with your white cells, which is the cells go around fighting, viruses and bacteria. Right now, they have machines that you can put it in there and it counts everything, gives you the count. I didn't have that back when I was a clinical biochemist. So I would have to look at it under a slide and count every single one. So I knew intimately what all of these cells look like, this cell, that cell. And I was able to know before the doctor knew what particular condition this person had, okay? So when you look at a slide, what you see a whole bunch of these white cells. They're called white cells. They look white. They walk around. You have the red cells, little red things. They look like little wafers, and they're red cells. So when I looked at that particular slide, I could see certain things. There's a condition where the red cells are supposed to float around, obviously all over the place, separate little red cells all over the place. But every once in a while, there would be a condition where the red cells would clump together. In other words, it'd be like they all clump together almost like a row, and the condition is called rouleau. It's a French which meaning these cells are clumped together. So that's not a good thing when I see that, and there's various pathologies or diseases that cause that. So what they found with the spike protein, with the COVID, what they found out with the spike protein caused those cells to clump together. So if your cells are not floating around, and one of the main purposes of a red blood cell is basically what it does is it takes your oxygen. Well, in this case, your veins take the carbon dioxide up to the lungs. You get rid of the carbon dioxide and you take an oxygen, goes back to the arteries, and you start all over again, kind of a loop. So that's what's supposed to happen. So what they found out with with COVID does, the spike protein causes those red cells to clump together in a long string. So what happens, and this is what they found out why people had trouble breathing when they had COVID. So the red cells would go up there, and they were trying to get rid of the carbon dioxide, but since they all clumped together, they couldn't do it. And that's the reason why you're not able to breathe, because your cells cannot release the carbon dioxide and take in the oxygen. So that was one of the big problems. So what they found is that's the reason why people to this day, if you have what they call long COVID, it's one of the reasons why you still have trouble breathing. Okay, so that's the mechanism of action. As a biochemist, I want to understand why it happens. I just don't want to throw a drug at it. I want to understand why it happens. So that's, if you're wondering why you can't breathe, it's because you have clumping of the cells, or rouleau. So when you look at that, what they found out was one of the ways they were able to treat people with long COVID. This is hot off the presses. I saw this literally an hour ago, so I was excited about this. If you know somebody with long COVID and stuff like this, this isn't all bad news. They found out there actually is, I can't use a cure, but there is a way to resolve this. And magically, it's ivermectin. You guys have probably all heard about ivermectin. The most famous one was Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, basically on his show, he was interviewed by I forget the guy's name. He was a doctor out of he was a medical guy for CNBC, and Sanjay Gupta, that was his name. He's a cardiologist, famous cardiologist. Went on, and so you can check this out on YouTube. Joe Rogan with the Sanjay Gupta interview. What they found, and he was talking to Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan came down with COVID, and Joe Rogan has access to the greatest medical minds. There's a group called the Frontline Doctors, and that was Robert Malone, Peter McCullough. These guys are like, they're at the top of the field, multiple publications. These guys were demonized in the beginning by Fauci and the rest because they were calling ivermectin horse dewormer. So, in case you don't know, ivermectin is the most prescribed drug in the world. It's got the best safety of any drug you've ever seen. So they give this to Africans because Africans come down with a lot of parasites because they're in the jungle and this stuff. It's great. It's great to eliminate parasites. In pharmacology, there's something called off-use, which means what happens is the drug is designed for parasites, but they also give it for something else. And doctors have the right to do this. But if you recall, during the whole COVID thing, the doctors were not allowed to give ivermectin. They couldn't even get it. I had a pharmacist on my show, Donna Bartlett, who wrote a book called MedStrong. She's on my show twice, and we talked a lot about it. And one of the things that Donna had said, that you couldn't even get ivermectin. I had another doctor on the show, Dr. Hamawi. We sat right here and we talked about it. She couldn't get ivermectin for her patients. She could write a prescription, but they wouldn't fill the prescription. So they for whatever reasons, I'll leave that up to you, they didn't want people to take ivermectin, even though all these experts were saying this ivermectin works really, really well. Again, as a biochemist, I want to know what's the mechanism of action. So now I know what the mechanism of action is. It breaks up the clotting of the blood cells inside of your veins, the rouleau. It stops that. what it does is it causes a little coating on there, so the red cells are able to separate. So now you can get the carbon dioxide out of your body and the oxygen back into your body. So that's really the mechanism of action with that. So that's the reason why, if you know somebody that has long COVID or COVID and they're having a lot of problems, again, feel free to email me. I know doctors that will prescribe this for you. Again, it's off use, but again, people are doing it more and more because they're finding out this ivermectin actually works really, really well. A lot of people have taken it. In fact, Joe Rogan, when he took it, he did a couple of things, but one of the big ones was the ivermectin, and in a few days he was better. So very, very short period of time, because what it does is it's breaking up the spike protein's interaction with your blood. So that's why the ivermectin works. They never knew why it worked until, I don't know, a few days ago. So they just found out. So this is, I get excited about stupid stuff. So I get really excited about that. The other thing, it's interesting, if you follow the news, there's been a lot of weird illnesses coming out. And again, I'm not going to speculate whether you believe it's due because people had COVID or whether you believe it's due to the vaccine. Side effects, I'll leave that up to you. But I have a good friend at the gym, a fellow gym rat of mine, a girl in her 30s, and she started coming down with something called POTS. Now, POTS is something called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. That's a big word. All it means is sometimes when you stand up real quickly, you'll get really faint and you may actually fall down. There's a number of causes of this, but this girl at the gym was telling me, because she's researching it now, and she researches all this stuff, and she's saying there's a big epidemic of this POTS now. Again, whether it's due to the virus or whether it's due to that, I'll leave that up to you. But one of the things that they found, again, in terms of the vaccine, it could also be, going back to this whole thing, the problem with the rouleau. That could be one of the causes. The other possible cause is you have something, basically a two-way highway. It's called the vagal nerve. It goes all the way from your brain all the way down to your gut. And it kind of tells your body what to do. And if it's not working correctly, what might happen is you may get real dizzy and you may fall down, or your blood pressure could really drop. One of the other things that they found, again, with the spike protein, what it does is you have a lot of receptors in your body. They're called ACE receptors. And one of the main ones for ACE receptors that actually are on your kidneys. And what those do is they found out that one of the main things this spike protein attacks is the COVID receptors on the ACE receptors on your kidneys. And the other thing your kidneys designed to do is basically to release a hormone called vasopressin. What vasopressin does, it regulates your blood pressure. So if your blood pressure is too high, vasopressin won't bring it down. If it's too low, it'll bring it up. So one of the things, if you have high blood pressure, they have a particular medication. What it does is it affects the ACE cells on your kidneys, and what it does is it regulates the vasopressin. So one of the theories as to why all of a sudden, and they also found out one of the main things that the COVID that the spike protein attacks is the ACE receptors. So again, mechanism of action. So what that happens is, since it's affecting your ACE receptors on your kidneys and messing up your vasopressin, maybe your vasopressin is not working correctly. It's not regulating your blood pressure. And my opinion, that could be another reason why you get this POTS, where all of a sudden you get up and you almost fall down, because it's not regulating correctly. The other thing that they found, they believe the ivermectin does, is they think, again, what it does is that with the spike protein, and if you think about it, the spike protein sounds like it is. These little spikes coming off this virus, and that's what's causing the problem. But one of the problems with the vaccine was it releases a whole ton of these spike proteins that are going all over the place, because that's what's causing the problem. But again, if these spike proteins are going into your ACE receptors, that's binding it up. So the other thing they found, again, within the last couple of weeks, is they found out that ivermectin somehow it puts a cap on top of that spike protein. So the spike protein can no longer attack things because it's capped. So two things: it cuts back on the rouleau, the clumping together of the blood vessels, of the red cells, and it also is capping it. So what you're doing basically with this is you're deactivating the spike protein. So I don't know about you, ivermectin's got the best health profile, no negatives. I would do this in a heartbeat if that were me. Again, this is not medical advice, so you talk to your doctor, but I can almost guarantee your doctor hasn't heard of this. This is brand new. I love doctors, but these guys are working right now. They're short-staffed. They're working a zillion hours. They don't have time to go home and look at the latest research. The other thing is with the FDA, in order to get things approved for medical use, you have to go through long trials. They cost hundreds, millions and millions of dollars to do this. There's no money in this. Ivermectin is very, very cheap. There's no money. There's no pharmaceutical company is going to pay millions of dollars to get this done because there's no money in it. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I think that's the reality of the situation. So again, if you got people that got COVID, long COVID, and it's awful because if you got long COVID, you're sick, as it said, by definition, you're sick for a really, really long period of time. Or if you've got POTS and you think the POTS is related to this particular situation, what do you got to lose? Again, email me, philgeorge@charter.net. I know doctors, I know pharmacists that will prescribe this for you. Obviously, you have to meet with them and stuff like that, but that's one of it. So that's exciting news. So I covered that. Now I'll get back kind of to the subjects I wanted to cover. People contact me all the time for advice on different things, and so at least I let them know my opinion. Of course, always check with your doctor. I tell them up front. The way I like to present it is it's not medical advice. If I were you, this is what I would do for me. But everybody's different. You have a different health condition than I do. You have different genetics than I do. So I don't know you, but if I were you, this is what I would do. There's two particular drugs that are constantly prescribed for different things. One of them is, you guys probably have heard of osteopenia, osteoporosis. Osteopenia just means it's a weakening of the bones. Osteoporosis, severe weakening of the bones. This especially happens to women because estrogen, it's really good at protecting the bones and throwing the calcium into the bones. So that's one issue. So I had this one person that contacted me, and she went in to see her doctor, and they did a bone density, which I suggest all women do, men too, because you want to know your bone density. And they found out that she had some osteopenia. The bone was getting weaker. And if you go to see any doctor, I guarantee you, close to 1,000%, they're going to prescribe a drug called the bisphosphonate. The most popular, name of this is Fosamax. So you see it on TV. You got weak bones. Take this, and everything will be wonderful. So this particular person I spoke with, and the doctor told her that based on your particular calcium score, that you have a 5% chance within the next 10 years of having a hip fracture. And hip fracture, it's scary. But you have to look at something called risk-reward. This is in medicine. Is it worth? In other words, the old expression is the cure worse than the disease? Sometimes some of these drugs are worse than the actual disease. If you see things on TV, if you take this drug, you'll want to commit suicide. All this crazy stuff. It sounds pretty scary, but you got to know the risk. What's the risk-reward? What's my risk? So I spoke with this person, and I said, I said, you got a 5% chance in the next 10 years. That comes down to 0.5% per year. That's pretty low. I mean, you probably, if you fly in a jet plane, I don't know what but there's risk in life, but that's a pretty low risk in my opinion. The other thing is, I explained to her the downside of bisphosphonates. So I'm going to get a little bit into bone health here. So a lot of people don't realize, people think your bone is this solid structure. Actually, your bone bends a lot. In fact, they have very specific protocols where they'll put you under certain things. Actually, will bend your bone. By bending your bone, it makes the bone stronger. Your bone bends quite a bit. The way to think about it, again, is the difference between an oak tree and a willow tree. And a hurricane is going to knock down all the oak trees because they're very, very stiff and they break. The willow tree is going to bend. Your bone is like a willow tree. It's not supposed to be an oak tree, okay? It's supposed to bend under various tensions. Most people think of bone health, they think of calcium, okay? But there's a lot more to bone than calcium. 40%, that's 40, almost half your bone is made up of something called collagen, which is a protein. So the way I like to explain it, you're basically, the collagen is like a scaffolding you put up, and you put the mortar between it. That's what happened. It holds the calcium, the magnesium, the phosphorus, it holds all that stuff in there. So the main thing isn't the calcium. The calcium is important because it gives it more structure, but really the important thing is the collagen because the bone has to bend. Get a little technical here, a little bit into the biochemistry. So you have two cells basically that work on your bone. One of them is called an osteoclast. Osteo means bone. Class means breaking away. So these osteoclasts, what they do is they go into the bone and they take the bone out. They take out calcium, they take out magnesium, they take out phosphorus, and they put it back into the body. Then you have something called osteoblasts, and osteoblasts build the bone back up. So your bone is constantly being turned over because things wear out. Collagen wears out. You need new calcium. It goes around and around. In fact, the greatest depository of calcium is in your bones. So if you became calcium deficient, it will actually take the calcium out of your bones and it'll put it in different places. So you want bone to be turned over on a regular basis. You don't want it to be stagnant. Getting back to the bisphosphonates or to the Fosamax. So what happens is, you go in, and I can guarantee you, if you see any doctor, most people are going to tell you that they take the bisphosphonates. So you go in there, and what it does is, remember the osteoclasts. They go in there and they take the bone out, okay? What it does is it kind of really down-regulates or shuts down the osteoclast. So the osteoclasts, they're not taking bone out anymore. The osteoblasts that put the calcium back into the bone, that keeps putting into the bone. So it looks good on the x-ray. So you come back in 6 months after you've taken these bisphosphonates, and they look at your bone score has gone up. It looks great on paper, and it may look great on paper for 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, maybe a couple of years. It'll look better. But what's happening is your bone is getting stiffer and stiffer. Remember the oak tree snaps. Remember the willow tree, it bends. You want your bones to bend. You don't want them to snap. There's a condition, and this is all over. Again, email me, philgeorge@charter.net. If you want, I can send you orthopedic surgeons that talk about this. They call it the Fosamax fracture. You've been on this stuff for months or years, these bisphosphonates, and all of a sudden you get a spontaneous fracture. Could be your wrist. It could be any. Just they recognize this. This is well known in orthopedics. It'll just snap. So yeah, your bone is more brittle. It's brittle. It's a better example. Even a better example, like somebody was telling me, if you have a china bowl and you have a wood bowl, you drop them both from a distance, that's going to shatter. The wood's not going to shatter because it's more pliable. It's more bendable. So my opinion, not medical advice. If I were you, I wouldn't touch Fosamax or bisphosphonates with a 10-foot pole because, again, I think you're setting yourself up for some problems. So that's one thing. People ask me then, okay, I've got some osteopenia, I got some osteoporosis. So what do I do? So one of the things you want to do is I talk a lot about vitamin D. People know of vitamin D. I think it's like 70% of people, especially in the Northeast, are vitamin D deficient. Vitamin D is actually a hormone. And it's very, very important. It does a bunch of stuff. But one of the things most people are aware of, it takes calcium into the blood, okay? So people are aware of that. So a lot of times we'll just take more vitamin D and take more calcium. The problem with that is what's happening with vitamin D, when it gets it into your blood, the calcium can go into one or two places. One of them, it can go into your bones, is where you want it. The other place it can go is into your arteries, arterial sclerosis. You don't want that. You don't want calcifications of your artery. It causes heart attacks, strokes. You guys know this. So what you want is you want that calcium to go into the bone. The other problem is, even if it's not going into your arteries, it can also go into your soft tissues, like around your knee, and you can get all this. You get your knees are creaking. You don't feel good. You get like aches and pains. So you don't want calcium in your soft tissue. You don't want calcium in your arteries. You want them in your bones. You want them in your teeth. You want You want to put that calcium where it's going to go. So what do you take? K2. K2, so vitamin K2, not to be confused with vitamin K1. People confuse this all the time, and I actually had a nurse, that I was talking to, and I think she got confused on this. She says, well, you shouldn't take K2 if you're on a blood thinner. K2 has no effect on blood coagulation. That's K1. K1, K2, they're both K. They work entirely differently, so just be aware of that. So you can get, email me, philgeorge@charter.net. I have trusted supplements that I use in the correct proportion that I'll send you over what I take. And again, that's up to you. Do whatever you want. So I give my wife, my whole family, D3 and K2 together because I want that calcium going. I want that calcium going into their bones and not into their soft tissue and their arteries. So instead of going ahead with the bisphosphonates, go ahead and take D3 and K2 and build it up. The other thing you can do is build up bone health, and I mentioned this to anybody, especially women, younger women. You only have a certain period of time to build up your bone density, and this is what you want to do. So don't wait until you get perimenopause or premenopause. Do it now because you have a window right now to build up that calcium inside of your bones. So what I recommend is basically what they call resistance training, which either you're doing bands, you're pulling bands, you're lifting weights and stuff like that. You get a twofer with that. You get two benefits. One is you build up muscle. The second thing it does, because you put strain on the muscle, you're also putting strain on the bone, okay? So you're building up bone mass. So you're getting two for the price of one. I had a guest on the show. He's right in Leicester here, is Mike from Atlantic Athletics. Mike's great, so I can't recommend him highly enough. He's right down the street here in Leicester, right down on Route 9. I had the whole golf show on, in fact, on my radio show. We talked about that. Just like you're not going to go out there and try to learn how to play golf by yourself or try to, I was mentioning it to Megan right beforehand, maybe Megan should take up a tennis. But I said, if you go out and try to play tennis on your own, you're going to build up a lot of bad habits. So, and I was mentioning to Megan, I taught tennis. I coached the Becker tennis team. I coached the Worcester State tennis team. So I've given tennis lessons. I mentioned to Megan the hardest thing I had to do was to unlearn bad habits. It's once you get into that, there's something called a muscle memory pattern. Once you hit that stroke wrong for a long period of time, very, very hard to break that habit. There's a thing in neurology called neurons that fire together, wire together. You build up a pathway where you do the same bad stroke, whether it's in golf, tennis, or whatever, over and over again. So not a good thing. So do it right from the beginning. If you're going to learn how to play golf, tennis, or whatever, save yourself a lot of aggravation. Pay a couple of bucks, have somebody teach you how to do it correctly, or at least watch you. So that's what it works the same exact way in terms of athletics. So what you want to do is you want to go somewhere, and what I like about Atlantic Athletics with Mike is that he will sit down with you, he'll analyze you and figure what's going on, and then he'll show you the correct way of doing it. I'm a personal trainer, and my first rule in personal training is first do no harm. So don't hurt yourself. Go in. You can go into a big box gym like Planet Fitness or whatever, but again, you're not going to know what you're doing if you follow everybody else. You can't really see what you're doing. Sorry guys, a lot of information. So I got the 30-second warning here from Megan. So I want to wrap up. Oh, and I'm going to be giving a big seminar specifically on Alzheimer's and dementia email me, philgeorge@charter.net. It's free. It's going to be at the Greendale Y, and that's going to be June 12th at 10 a.m. And again, email me, philgeorge@charter.net, and I'll send you over an invite. There's no cost, but I got a lot of good slides. This stuff on Alzheimer's is brand new. You're not going to hear this from most of your doctors. This stuff is hot off the press, and I have a lot of nice, cute slides. We give out prizes and stuff for correct answers. So I try to make it a lot of fun, and I try to avoid, any kind of just lecture, blah, blah, blah stuff. So tune in next week. We'll have a guest next week, hopefully, unless something happens, and I'll see you next week. One of the most common questions I'm asked as a biochemist and health coach is, what are the best supplements to take? Choosing supplements is a tricky business. Many companies have poor quality control and questionable ingredients. In the past, I had to send clients to several different websites. I am now able to offer one-stop shopping for all the quality brands I recommend with no shipping cost and a lower price in most cases. Just email me, philgeorge@charter.net, for a free consult.